On this episode, we'll discuss strategies to ignite engagement at your church. Well, hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast, the show that is dedicated to inspiring leaders and empowering healthy churches. How do we do that? It is all through conversations, interviews, and stories as we're exploring what's happening in ministry today and how pastors and leaders can navigate what lies ahead. I am your host, Kendall Connor, and let me tell you, we have got a great one planned for you today. Joining us today is a very special guest who is practically a Church Leadership Lab legend at this point. He's joined us several times before, and that is the one and only Mark MacDonald. Now, today we get to dive into the subject of strategies that will ignite engagement at your church, which I know is just a really great topic to cover, just because I know that all churches want to get their community, get their congregation more engaged. And so listen, if you haven't connected with Mark before, first, I would tell you, I would definitely recommend going back and listening to some of our previous conversations that we've had with them. All of those are so good. But let me give you a little bit of background on him if you haven't connected with him before. Mark MacDonald is a church branding strategist, and he's the founder of Be Known for Something, which is a national church communications and branding company that coaches pastors and churches to really just become their most relevant selves to their communities. He is a best-selling author. He has been a guest on over 80 podcasts, written over 800 articles on church communications that have been published. And he has over 35 years of experience in advertising, communications, design, writing, speaking, ministry experience, all of these things. And so without further ado, let's jump into our conversation today. Hey, how are you, Mark?
Kendall, I am doing amazing, but now all of a sudden it's like the bar just got raised. I feel the pressure.
Oh, I know you've going back and reviewing some of the previous episodes. It just got me super stoked because I know that we're going to be able to dive into this conversation. I know you're going to bring so much to it. And so it's an honor to talk with you today. Thank you for joining us. For all of our listeners, where are you joining us from today?
I'm in Jacksonville, Florida, and it's kind of that crazy route that started. I'm Canadian, so I'm in East Coast Canada, and I was working for a big agency there, and the entire time, you know, what's written behind you, remember why you started? Well, the reason why I started was in the big agency, I just realized there's a whole bunch of stuff that we know that we would do for secular businesses, but why doesn't the church know this stuff? And oftentimes I think that marketing and branding and all of those buzzwords, they just feel very businessy, but ultimately it's taking a product that is an amazing product to a market that needs it. And really what it comes down to is, I call that evangelism. So if we're doing marketing the right way, it is really good evangelism.
I love that. Yeah. And marketing can sometimes be a word that scares off, our ministry audience. But at the same time, I always think of it is that outreach, right? It's evangelism. It's getting the word out, and we've got a great message to get out to the world, right?
Oh, absolutely. And really what you're talking about today, that whole idea of engagement, I think that every pastor feels like it's elusive. And really what it comes down to is, what does engagement really mean? Oftentimes lead pastors, they like to talk about discipleship and really discipleship and engagement. There's the Venn diagram overlap that right. I think that both are elusive to most churches. So what a great topic. Thank you for bringing it up.
For sure. Well, of course, we've read the public bio, right? But would you be willing to share something that maybe doesn't make that public bio? What's something that all your family and friends would know about you? We always love to start the podcast like this.
Okay, so I have been on this podcast a few times, and I feel like I have way overshared about a whole bunch of things, and probably... So that makes me nervous because I'm not an oversharer. Probably the thing that that most people that know me quite well, they know that I'm fairly introverted. And so, whether I'm on a stage or like if somebody says, "Hey, Mark, here's a microphone, go out and do something," I'm all over it. So I would certainly say that I totally recharge when I'm by myself. And so that whole idea of being introverted, I mean, I've had to learn to communicate boldly, and that kind of gets back to, when it comes to church branding and communication, it's not always about being the loudest. It's about being clear and known for something that really matters. And that's where I've had to take on that role. And I try not to be loud and obnoxious the way some people can be. Instead, I just try to do something that matters.
No, I love that. And, I feel like I'm an introvert myself. And so while I may jump on a stage at church or at a conference or jump on the podcast like this, after it's over, I've got to go and take that rest, right? Just give me a few minutes. Do you feel that same way?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I've got to recharge.
When I go away and speak at a conference, my wife knows when I arrive back home, I just need a little bit of time by myself. I enjoy flights. I enjoy sitting there all by myself.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that you've heard, I mean, it's called an omnivert, somebody who can put on the role of being extroverted, even though that they're introverted.
I've never heard that term used, and now I'm going to steal that, and I've got to, that's my new one that I'm going to tell everyone that I am.
We fake it well.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we've talked a little bit about this, but tell us a little bit about your story. I'd love to hear some about your journey, and I think it could encourage some of our listeners to just know kind of how you've served both, you've served in churches, you've served churches, and you're inspiring ministry leaders everywhere now. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we last left off at Mark MacDonald in Atlantic Canada. And I was senior creative director for one of Eastern Canada's largest ad agencies. And then God just opened up the doors for us to move to Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And it was there that I realized, okay, so what does an agency look like if it is for churches and it's for pastors? And so we we had several different offices. We ended up in the world headquarters building for Krispy Kreme, and we ended up having our office space where they used to have a test kitchen. So what would oftentimes happen was when it got really warm in our office, people would say, "It kind of smells like glaze here." And I felt like we should have had a hot now sign, be known for something hot now. So
I love it. I mean, and I want to interrupt you really quickly, because for anyone who has been a regular listener on this podcast, has heard me talk about I'm in North Carolina, and so y'all have got to know where he's talking about right now is like my backyard. I mean, it's just up the road, and so I know exactly where you're talking about. And the hot now sign. Now I'm just hungry thinking about this. All right, I'll let you keep going.
Exactly. And I remember moving from Canada, never had a Krispy Kreme donut before, and then I thought, oh my goodness, these hot now donuts, like they just melt in your mouth. There can't be any calories. So we'll leave it at that there are probably more calories than you would ever expect. But what I discovered in Winston-Salem was that there's a lot of churches that are being ignored. And I just wanted to help churches stop being ignored. So for decades now, I've been able to coach. That was 24 years ago. I've been coaching leaders and ministry leaders to clarify their message so that the community will actually pay attention again. When the church communicates well, lives then change. And that's what we're called to do. We're called to go into a world that's dying and going to hell if we don't communicate properly.
Yes.
And the cool thing is that as I've been able to do this and over the years work with so many different churches, thousands of people use my book, which became a bestseller, which is just crazy. I'm just this little kid from East Coast Canada, and people use that book to figure out what their church brand is, what should they be known for. And what we've done through all of that is we've created what we call the fastest way to a church rebrand. And in 2 to 3 days, we go in, work with a church, show them reliable research, and oftentimes their church brand kind of springs from that.
That's incredible. And, of course, I love hearing, the time that you spend in North Carolina. I love hearing that. But then to see where you've been able to take this journey, right, to help churches be known for something so encouraging, and love hearing your heart for helping ministries in that way.
Yeah, and the Florida Baptist Convention asked me to come to Jacksonville, Florida. That's how we jumped from North Carolina to Florida, and worked with their 3,000 Baptist churches here in Florida. But then now we have the agency back, and we work with all denominations all across the country. Yeah. And I can't believe I get to do what I get to do.
It's incredible. And I love Florida too. I always feel like that's like our our family's go-to vacation spot. And so you just get to live in that vacation at all times. I just imagine that's how your life is.
It's so crazy how different North Carolina and Florida, like just the climate. There were oftentimes as a Canadian, I just basked in like, oh my goodness, North Carolina, the weather's so amazing. Yeah, Florida, I think, is just a little more amazing.
Yeah, no, I love that. All right, well, let's talk about engagement. I feel like this can kind of be a buzzword for churches, right? I said it in the intro. There's not a church in the world that doesn't want their community, their congregation to be more engaged. But we know that so many ministries they struggle with this. Why do you think that is? What's maybe even some misconceptions that church leaders have about engagement?
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy because engagement isn't about what we say; it's about why people care. And oftentimes, I think that the church thinks all we have to do is just say more, and people will listen more, but people will actually listen less unless we make it about why they care. And I think that the biggest mistake is that churches assume that people are actually listening, and they're not. They're being ignored, and we've got to figure out how do we earn the attention of the people in our community, and earn the people the community we need to be focused on, but let's actually get our congregations to listen. And if we can get that to happen and actually get true engagement there, then I think more people from our community would want to listen as well.
Wow. You're saying let's first start with the people who are in the seats, right? Who are in the pews. If we can get what we're doing with them right, if we can get our communication right, we can get them engaged, then we can be able to better serve those that are outside. Honestly, I think if we do that, it's gonna better when people from our community actually do walk in our doors. We're going to be set up for success. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And I think what we need to realize is that the congregation that we have, the people in our pews, come from your community. We call that your reach area. Yes. It's not necessarily a radius around your church. It's probably a weird custom polygon shape. And the best way to identify that is to ask whoever has the CHMS, your church management system data, where your family units are, like plot on a map. Google Maps will do that really quite easily. If you have an Excel spreadsheet, plot on a map where people, where your family units actually come from, create a custom polygon shape around that area. That's your reach area. That's like the smallest pinpointed amount of people who would be interested in your church, because birds of a feather flock together. So most times your congregation sets your reach area. And then if you call that your community and you reach your congregation with something that they actually need, then most times your community, your reach area will also be interested in it.
No, I love that. That's great advice. I brought up communications, right? And I love that you said just because you're saying more doesn't mean that it's going to be successful. Let's hit on communications. I know that it can be overwhelming to a congregation when they're hearing too much, when you got a million announcements, when you've got all these different things that you want to communicate. What's the best way that churches can improve their communication in this season?
Yeah, understanding that more is not better.
Yeah.
Clearer is better. Clarity, like just really focus on clarity, and then cut all the other clutter and focus on next steps, and then make sure that you have repeated key messages that you're saying all the time with the church. It says thread behind me, and that's really what we're all about. We want every church to discover their thread. What is that one thing that positions you differently than all the other churches in your area, so that somebody quickly can see, oh, that's what they focus on. It's not everything you do, but it's what you focus on. And that clarity will bring people in, especially if you make sure that your thread is a solution to a need or a concern or a path to a goal that your community would actually pay attention to. And then probably the big thing is to understand that noise is our problem. The barrier to most communication today is this idea of noise. There are so many people out there that are saying so many things, and the people who create those things think it's the best thing ever. And your church is probably thinking, the information that we have, it's the best thing ever. Yeah. And so we think if we just say it, people will listen. And the problem is that that's not the case because of all the other noise that's around us. And so we need to figure out, how do we break through the noise? And most times that's by using same messages as consistently as possible and as constantly as possible.
Let me ask you this. When you say communicate those same messages over and over, what are the types of messages that a church would be communicating consistently like that?
Yeah, and that we call it the thread. And so in classical marketing terms, anytime that you have sameness, same, there might be somebody that's listening right now they're the only church in their community. I can't even imagine, but I'm sure that somebody is there. And then other people are thinking, one church. I mean, Jacksonville, Florida, when I started working for the Florida Baptist Convention, I said, so how many churches are here in Florida, in Jacksonville, as part of the Florida Baptist Convention? And they said, you won't believe this, but there's 200 Baptist churches in Jacksonville. Wow. And all of a sudden, if you're not by yourself in your community, right, and you have another one that is a church, and then oftentimes we have another one that's a church, the more you have that are perceived as same, you have to position yourself differently. So somehow you need to rise above all the sameness and say, but we're different this way. And that differentiating is the way that a brand is built.
And that is what to be communicated over and over and over. I love that. So we know that the communication it doesn't stop just on Sundays, right? It's not just in that 1 hour block that maybe that you have service, right? It's something to be communicating all throughout the week, right? How can we get our congregation to be more engaged outside of Sunday service?
Well, and it's interesting because oftentimes I know, because I've been to a lot of churches, I've also looked online at a lot of church information and a lot of church communication, and a church's digital presence shouldn't feel like an outdated bulletin board. And oftentimes we're just shooting all over the places and we have Post-it notes about this and make sure you know that. And what we're doing is we're just contributing to noise, like so much, so that everyone just kind of ignores it. And the algorithm works against us because the moment people get bored with your bulletin board that's out there, all of a sudden Facebook says, well, everyone just kind of flips by it really fast. So then it just appears less times on the people who follow your page. So we need to make sure that we're using social media, email, and ultimately your website to guide people to action. That engagement, like that whole idea of engagement is all about action. It's figuring out what people care about, giving them next steps, and then weirdly enough, people just miss that stuff unless you emphasize it and you give it in such a way so that people know, why do I care about this event and what would I be doing next? And you have to hold their hand to that call to action, that next step, because if not, oftentimes we just lose them. If we lose them along the caring line, like I really don't care about this event, then you've lost them. They'll never go to that next step. So when it comes to engagement, we have to make sure that we know why they care about something and push that, and don't worry about the details. Push why they should care, and then get them to a point where they're like, okay, I need more information. More information. And then have a consistent web presence so that people know I don't need to know all the information right now. I can just always find it later.
Such great advice. And I feel like that's, stepping on some toes, right? Because I know how often, coming from a church communications background myself, spent so much time in that. They have that tension, right? You want to give every piece of information every time that you talk about it, but really it's not about that. It's about letting them know why they should care. I love that. I love that advice, because if you don't catch them there, they're never going to care what time the event is, right? And it's important to have the details down, right? We don't want that to be a mystery, but at the same time, letting them know, like, this is how it's going to improve your life, right?
Well, how many times we hear an announcement and we don't care. And it's just, we hear, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's like the Peanuts character, it's happening. And then all of a sudden, near the end, they tell us why we should care.
Yes.
And then it's too late, because then it's like, how many times I've said to my wife, what were they just talking about? Because I actually want that. And by then you're moved on. So make sure you start with why they should care. The formula that we use here at Be Known for Something is say their name, because that'll get everyone's attention. Speak their pain, and that'll tell you why you care. It's like, oh my goodness, they understand me. Like they understand the things that I have, that I need in my life.
Yes.
And then, so say their name, speak their pain, solutions to proclaim, then give the solution. It's kind of like, oftentimes we lead with the event, which is the solution, rather than leading with what they should care about first, which is their pain.
I love that. And it rhymed. And a little bit of that pastoral side, I feel like just came out. That's that preacher side, I think, just came.
Exactly. Say their name, speak their pain, solutions to proclaim.
I love it.
The reason why I made it so that it rhymes is so I could remember it.
It's such solid advice. I just had to pick on you a little bit there, but it really is. It is really, really good advice. And believe me, I'm taking notes over here. This is stuff that I'm going to try to apply in my own church as I'm serving. Right. I love it.
Well, just make sure, even though it's a jingle, make sure you do it in that order, because oftentimes effective communication rises and falls on how well you know your audience. If you're not saying their name, if you can't identify who the event is or then there's no way you'll ever be able to speak to them in such a way that they'll care about it.
I love that. Got to remember it in that order. So we talked about the communication side, which I love. I could geek out on that stuff all day and talk about those elements. But now let's maybe shift towards engaging during that Sunday morning, that worship experience. Do you have any advice on that side of things?
Wow. This is a little bit out of my purview, but one of the things that I get to do, and I can't believe I get to do it, but I do mystery visits where churches will hire me to fly across the country and arrive in the community. Usually I come in on a Saturday. I look around the community on that Saturday just to try to get an idea of what the community is all about. What I also do is we've already come up with their reach area, and we've done a really solid, reliable research study on that reach area. And so we know what that community should look like. So what I oftentimes do on Saturday is I just look around and I try to figure out, how would I stereotypically describe this community? Yeah. And then I take on that role, that's called a persona, and I go into worship. And I mean, what we have to understand is that first-time guests decide in minutes if they'll ever return. Wow. And if you haven't been at your church for very long, you understand this. If you've been at your church for a long time, you've forgotten it.
It's hard to say that.
We've all gotten to a place where we just instantly go, yep, this isn't the place for me. And so we have to make sure that excellence from the parking lot to the stage and back to the parking lot, excellence matters. And we have to figure out, how do we do a warm welcome so that people don't feel creepy about it, but there needs to be a welcome, which, when we do our mystery visits, it's so rare that we ever feel totally welcome in our mystery visits. Most people don't know how to do it. And especially in our post-COVID years, we've all lost the ability to interact with people. So a church has to be very intentional and actually, like from the stage, whether it's reenacting it or just doing a little skit of like, what does it mean to actually say welcome to somebody?
Yes.
Or, what's even better, to be able to control that message a whole lot more. Do a video, put it out on social media, and have people watch. What does it mean to be welcoming and what does it mean to be creepy? And then know the difference. You can have some fun with it. Yeah. But you just have to make sure that in that welcome that you have a clarity. Remember, we're always going back to clarity, a clear message that what we call the thread that you want to be known for. And it's something that they probably want in their life. And then create engaging moments. In every experience, you can't have heightened, engaging moments the entire time. There has to be some, the rising and then the falling of those moments. Yeah. And every church needs to control those moments so that it just feels engaging. And then it's easier to ask somebody to engage in your church afterwards.
I love that. And, not every church has had the opportunity to have someone visit on a Sunday morning and, quote unquote, a secret shop the experience. Right. But a couple of weeks ago, we had someone on the podcast and they were talking about how, as a pastor, as he's a lead pastor, and he says, every now and then, every couple of months, I'll take a Sunday where someone else is speaking. And I try to, as a lead pastor, put myself in the shoes of walking in and sitting through that worship experience, that worship service, and just asking myself, being brutally honest, would I attend this church? And that was a really fun idea that I heard, and I thought, man, are we asking those questions? Are we taking the time to experience those moments? And then I love how you just take that to the next level. And man, there's so many good questions that I feel like we should be asking about our service.
We have to create an experience that's worth coming back for.
Yes.
And and it sounds weird, and this is probably where marketing comes in, and
Yes.
people don't feel good about doing this, but you have to do some self-promotion. And if somebody doesn't know why they should come back the next week, that's your fault, not their fault.
Yeah.
And so from the stage, in the middle of a sermon, you can say, "Oh my goodness!" And next week we're going to deal with this that you have to come back for. So if you're not pushing forward to say why somebody needs to come back, they probably will decide not to come back.
Wow. And that kind of brings us to my next question, and that's, I know how important it is to be an inviting church, to give them a reason to come. What can you tell us about that? That's certainly a part of engaging your community and engaging your congregation, right? Is have them inviting people to church.
Oh my goodness! So people want to belong before they believe, and oftentimes we say, like, tell somebody why they should be coming to this church.
Yeah.
They don't even know why they want to be part of the church. So they have to feel like they can belong before they ever believe that they need to engage and tell other people about the church. And so we need to make sure that we understand what belonging means. And usually the pastor from the stage, he should feel like he belongs there. If not, that's like a whole other podcast that we could talk about.
Yeah, that'd be a deep dive. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And oftentimes the pastor goes, I belong. I love what I say. I love being on the stage. I love being the center of attention. That's like a whole other issue that we could talk about as well. But the people in the pew have got to figure out why they belong. And often it will be missed if you're not telling them. That's a controlled message that you need to tell them why they belong, and then they'll start to believe it. And once they believe it, then it's easier for them to invite. And so we have to make sure that part of that belonging is making serving very easy. The more they engage and do things, the easier it is for them to feel like they belong.
Sure.
And not only because we've also worked a lot on website side, a lot of people, when we do focus groups and we talk to demographics in the churches, the number one thing that we hear all the time is, I just wasn't aware that they needed that. And oftentimes the leadership talks about all the needs, and we have to have more nursery workers, or we have to have more, some place digitally where all of those things are listed, and make sure that it's easily filterable so that people understand. It's like, I don't want to sign up for a long time. I just want to do something just for a short-term basis to try it, because we have all been there where it's like, I would love to do the nursery. And then 10 years from now, you're thinking, how do I get out of this nursery duty? So we have to make sure that making serving is easy, it's visible, and then ultimately rewarding. And how do you reward those people? And if you're not doing it on a regular basis, you're not rewarding enough.
Wow. Such good advice. I know that there's lots of ministry leaders listening to this. They may be serving in a pastoral role, or they may be an administrator, or, lots of different areas of serving in different ministry contexts. What would you say? How would you tell them if they're listening to this and they're thinking, man, our church is not as engaged as they should be, and they're maybe even be kind of discouraged in that? What's the first step that they should take to just make an improvement?
Well, it's really understanding that when people serve, they stay. And we have to figure out how do we get people to serve, and by staying, their faith will deepen. And that's what we're in this for.
Yeah.
So it really comes down to that serving and figuring out how do we create these things that we can make them care about. And oftentimes the church thinks, okay, well, there's this that we want to do, and this is what they care about. And we have to fall in love with the people that come to our church. And if we're not scratching an itch that they're having, they will eventually leave. So we need to figure out, how do we get people to do what they like to do so that we can do it for the kingdom. And that whole culture of invitation, we have to create as many simple tools as possible, whether that's, invite cards and regular testimonies of the change that's happening in our churches, or our social media posts. And just the church needs to model that culture of sharing and doing before they can ever expect the people in the pews to do it. So we've got to celebrate it. We've got to make sure that the staff is actually doing what they're asking the people in the pews to be doing and modeling it for them. And then more people will want to engage with it.
I love that. Such great wisdom. Man, so many steps that I feel like, practical steps I feel like you could take from this podcast episode today. So good. Something that we love to ask our guests is, we talk a lot about healthy churches. In your opinion, what would you say is an essential component of a healthy church? And maybe it's related to engagement, maybe it's not, but what would you say?
Wow, what a great question. And there are so many times that I've talked to a leader in a church, and he or she does not understand what it means to have a healthy church. They know they're not healthy.
Sure.
But really, a healthy church is known for something that matters to the community. We have the greatest story ever told, and we have this quote unquote product of salvation, the gospel message.
Yeah.
And there is a world around you that is lost, and they don't understand. They don't even know what they don't know. They know there's something missing in my life. And oftentimes the church just needs to figure out, how do we speak to what matters so that they actually do care, and then really meet needs. What I've oftentimes found, when I'm on a flight and I'm just striking up a conversation with somebody around me, if I talk about Jesus too soon, it ends the conversation. And oftentimes I think that the church talks too religious to their community. Instead, there are things that the people need, they want to engage with. We'll meet them there. There's going to be more time later when you can share the full gospel message. And if we can meet them where it actually matters to them, where the caring meets their needs, then that's when the gospel will truly spread. Wow.
This has been such a valuable conversation today, Mark. I love the advice and the practical tips that you've given. Something that we always like to do to end things up, or to end things, is do a final five or rapid fire. Are you up for the challenge? You've done this before, so maybe this will be a fresh spin on some of these questions.
Okay, this is the part that I'm most nervous about, mainly because I feel like I have a very boring life. When I hear other people say all of these things, it's like, okay, I will do this, but you're going to find out that I have a pretty boring life.
Oh, I don't think that's true. Let's see. The first question is, what's one book on this subject or something similar that you would recommend for church leaders?
And I mean, you better say other than Be Known for Something, which is available on Amazon. But if you ever do go to Amazon and you search for Be Known for Something, which is a great book, oftentimes Amazon will recommend two other really great books. And
I gotta know, what are these books?
So the other two books is, of course, Ken Meyer wrote the quintessential book called Less Chaos, Less Noise. It's been written so long ago, but yet it's still a really good one. And then Phil Bowdle, of course, he's a really good friend of mine. He wrote Rethink Communication, and I have oftentimes thought that Phil and I think so much alike that he could have written my book, I could have written his.
I love that. I think that book is on the shelf behind me back there. That's a great one.
Then there needs to be a blue book that looks like.
I've got to get it on the shelf. I tell you,
after this, you send me your address and I'll ship.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. All right. The next question is what is the last thing that you listen to on Apple Music or Spotify, wherever you listen to the things?
Okay. So this is where it comes pretty boring. I would probably say I don't listen to as many podcasts as I should. I don't read as many books as I should. Every time that I try to do that, I always think, oh my goodness, I love this stuff. Why don't I do more of it? It's kind of like, you have your devotions and you think, I should be doing this every day. And then, well, that's a whole other issue. So I would say it's probably some leadership podcast, Carrie Newhoff or
always a good one.
Rainier on leadership or church leaders podcast, like all of those. I love it. But then like in between all of those, you would probably be some type of 80s rock.
Music. There you go.
And ultimately it kind of, it satisfies everything that I've said today. So it's clarity with a good beat. They go hand in hand.
I love that. I always got to love to get the 80s rock in there. I'm here for it. What is your favorite piece of technology or software these days?
Well, a client of mine is Church Visuals, and they are doing some really phenomenal work. They also have a great podcast and some series that can help teach people why your visuals matter. And it's figuring out what are the visuals that people are looking for, and then how do you use them for the gospel.
I love that. And that's Carl Barnhill. He was on our podcast. We interviewed him, a couple of months ago. Amazing, amazing guy. And you're right. The content that they're putting out is phenomenal. Love that.
Them being a client, we helped rename them recently, and
incredible.
And so I love what Carl's doing.
Yeah, that's really cool. Really cool to hear you bring that up. That's awesome. All right, what about what's a quote or maybe some advice that stuck out to you over the years?
There are so many quotes. Probably this one, just because it kind of goes along with what we've just been talking about. People don't remember announcements. They remember what impacts them. If we can just figure out how do we make them care, it will impact them and they'll remember it.
Yes.
Where the average announcement in our church is totally forgettable.
Yeah. Man, that's really good. Finally today, what is one thing that you'd like to communicate to our audience of church leaders?
If your church disappeared tomorrow, would your community even notice? And we need to figure out how we can become known for something that truly matters. And if we can do that, more people will want to engage with us because it matters to them. And it will also propel us to understand how, as Jesus said, we'll be known for love, so that we can actually pay attention and love the people that are around us in such a way that we're creating products that they're looking for and that they'll want to engage with.
Man, so good. Mark, this has been amazing. Where can people follow you? Is there anything that you'd like to share with us today? Anything that you're working on currently that they should know about?
Well, if you're in Jacksonville, you can follow me around town. Or what would be easier is to just follow me on all the social media channels. I even have a Pinterest board. I have Instagram.
Love it.
Facebook, LinkedIn, and it's usually Mark Mac 1023 or Mark MacDonald or Be Known for something. And then for like this whole idea of our leadership retreat, where it is the fastest way to a church rebrand, we sit down with all the reliable research, with all the leadership in a room, and usually within 2 to 2.5 days, we come up with the thread for you, with you, and we make sure that it's unique and different so that you differentiate yourself. And how unique? Well, we as a huge high bar is we make sure that your tagline, that thread, you can actually buy the URL. So we look for the .com, and that kind of tells us whether or not anybody else is saying it. And we want to make sure that you're as unique as your community is.
Wow. I love that. We'll definitely link everything up in the show notes to make sure that all of our listeners can find all of these resources. This has just been phenomenal. Mark, thank you for being on here, for talking with us today and dropping some truth bombs on us. And I know, like I said, I've been taking some notes over here, and I know it's been encouraging to me. So I know it's been encouraging to our listeners. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been a real treat. And for all of our listeners, thank you for being a part of this with us. If it has been valuable to you, would you follow us wherever you listen to your podcast, wherever that is? Leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing, what you'd love to see more of. And if you're watching over on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Leave us a comment. Let us know all of the things today that you'd love to see more of, right? And I would just say, all of those, they just help us to get this into the ears of more and more church leaders. And so we appreciate all you do to help us to get the word out, and so we can keep doing what we're doing. But until next time, we hope to see you again soon right here on Church Leadership Lab.
This episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast is brought to you by Ministry Brands, the largest provider of church technology software. Over 90,000 churches rely on Ministry Brands for their single platform solution that brings together all the digital tools a church needs. From online giving to websites to church management software and more, Ministry Brands is leading the way in simple to use, innovative solutions, all with the goal of empowering healthy churches. To learn more, visit ministrybrands.com.